Hey guys, it's Roderick, and I'm here with Mayfair Witches Season 1, Episode 6, Transference. So I hope everyone's had a great weekend. It was my birthday weekend. I had a fantastic time, and I waited to watch Mayfair Witches, last night, just because I didn't want to vex my spirit, because it ended up vexing my spirit. So let's get into it, because we're not going to be here for too long. So if you're new to this channel, welcome. It's where we talk about films, television shows, a little bit of reality, but it's always a key. So when we've discussed Mayfair Witches before, I was kind of like, I didn't want to come to judgment about some of the choices they were making, because I wasn't sure whether or not the choices that I was seeing kind of lined up to what was actually materializing on the page and actually like on the film. Now, by 6 episodes in, I can definitely say they have made some missteps with their choices, right? And the writing has just not been on par. And then this episode in particular, I thought was probably one of the worst acted episodes I had seen with the level of talent that they had to work with, right? So let's talk about their choices, because again, there's 2 levels of choices that have been made in the show where there have been missteps, right? First, there's been the decision to kind of tame the narrative of taming the source material, right? Because as we discussed, the book goes between various different timelines, right? And it kept giving us flashbacks, earlier in, but not really connecting with what was really going on in the present. And in this episode, we finally get to see the attempt to kind of connect the flashbacks a little bit. So I really feel like the episode should have been called Too Little Too Late, right? Because this type of narrative work that they did with the flashbacks and connecting to the present should have been done earlier in the episode, right? But again, that is just the nature of them really fumbling and really mishandling the source material, which we've already discussed. If you want to go back and watch my Let's Talk About Mayfair Witches, I kind of go in discussion about how that's kind of really been sorely mishandled. As a person who has not read the books, right, I can tell that they have mishandled this, right? So the next level of choices that they made is, okay, now that we're going to kind of parse out what's coming out of the source material, right? What story are we going to tell, right? And the fact is, still after episode 6, we still don't know whose story is this. This is theoretically Rowan's story, but all we've seen is Suzanne in the past, right? And their attempt to connect. And that was not the assignment, right? As discussed, the assignment, all they had to do was connect Mayfair Witches to Interview with the Vampire, establish Rowan within the universe, establish her antagonist, and just give us just a really decent story, right? So they have then fumbled that level, right, in the choices, because what they've decided to do is really give us a very poorly constructed, not even thinly veiled discussion or eulogy about white American feminism, right? And as a cis gay man, I believe feminism is very important to the American culture, to the discussion and the empowerment of women in the United States society and around the world. However, this was not it. Because what they also have done in fumbling around, talking about using very thin allegories for feminism, is they have mishandled the issue of race in this and have really shown why white American feminism always occurs on the backs and to the detriment of Black women, right? So when Delphine got locked up and got thrown in a cellar, I was like, okay, Sip running around acting like the magical Negro. I was like, okay. Now we have the Haitian Mayfair witch coming in and cleaning up and doing work that really one of the other white witches should have been doing, right? So that really that allegory of really feminism they have just really fumbled that, right? Especially when you have another show like Interview with the Vampire that was set back in the 20s that had very palpable race issues. Mayfair Witches could have done a better job in really dealing with race and Black women and the Black witches that are in the Mayfair clan, right? And they have totally fumbled this and whatever. So I was just this whole episode, I was just here we go. And then, so here's the choice also that has come to make, right? So Lasher is really the representation, right, of the power of the Mayfair witches. And so what they've decided to do is kind of tell this story of Rowan really wanting to stand on her own outside of Lasher and really be her own witch, her own person, and not really be connected or succumb to the power of Lasher, right? So the white male patriarchy, the white woman wanted to have her own, stand on her own, whatever, right? Okay, fine. I get that story, right? But the problem is that if that's the story you're going to tell, you should have started that at episode 1, right? And then they foist, once again, this bumbling kind of anti-witch MAGA propaganda in with another storyline, and it's just not hitting, right? So let's get to the episode. So we start off again, and Rowan is meeting with her, goes to see Uncle Cortland, and she starts talking about, how to get rid of Lasher. Now we know that Cortland is a very pro-Lasher person. He's like, you could really use him to your advantage. She doesn't want to. She gets a sense, right? I guess that effect is Rowan's power. He has ALS. So they decide that they're going to transfer. So she's like, I don't want him. I could be without him. I don't need his power. I don't need him. His power or whatever he gives to me, it doesn't take away from who I am. Okay, fine. Now then we have, on the other hand, Sip meets with our South Asian Talamascan agent, and he's going to go in and figure out the history of the locket. Sorry, I left out a point. The show starts off with Lasher so now Rowan and Sip are sharing a bed together. Okay, when did that happen? Right? That's why I skipped it, because I was just like, stop playing in my face, right? So now they're sharing a bed together. Are they dating? Are they just having sex? Like, is that the only bed in the house? We don't know, but she's up in the bed. She wakes up to eat Chinese food, and she's having a conversation with Lasher. So then Sip gets up, and then she lies to him when he's like, I can sense he's here. I think he's here, and Lasher's here. So then we have her lying to Sip about her being with Lasher, and we don't know why she's lying, right? Did their little experience last week leave a mark? Okay, she's bound to him, he's in their blood, but why is she lying, right? Because what they wanted us to believe last episode is that Sip and Rowan had this great magical connection by the holding on of hands and whatever like that they were having some great relationship. So again, I just looked at that whole scene and just side-eyed it all the way. And so then that's how Sip ends up with the necklace, that he's with the Talamascan agent now, and he's like going to go back in time. At this point, back in Scotland or wherever, Suzanne's been caged. They've come to take her because they think she's a witch, because the man whose child was born with deformities has decided she's a witch, right? So Sip goes back in time and sees kind of the taking of Suzanne into this cage. They're throwing rocks at her. They're like, go, throw it in the river. And, every show is upset. The other sister witch just use the dark words, whatever. So we see Suzanne summon Lasher. He burns down the village. He's like, are you mine? You're yours. And that's pretty much it, right? Again, I would have loved to see this 5-6 episodes earlier, right? Now, in the meantime, Lasher sees Sip back in the past while he's viewing this. How? We don't know, whatever. But now Sip is stuck in the past, right? Because he's Lasher knocked him out, the locket's gone, and there we go. Where did the locket go? Well, the Black Mayfair witch is doing her magical Negro work. We're going on to talk to Uncle Cortland about this transference, and then Uncle Cortland gives her a piece of hair from Deirdre, and then they decide they're going to use that for the transference. Black Mayfair witch meets up with Rowan, talks to her about Cortland's father had a thing for necromancy. So he had all the pieces of the former Mayfair witches, and she had to this is what we're going to use to transfer them. Rowan's looking at this okay. And then she's like, girl, just go ahead and braid in the hair. And Rowan's like, braid in the hair? And she's like, you need to start acting like a Mayfair, right? Which again, this character, right, would have been a great character for us to have seen earlier on, because she adds some flavor and some texture to who are the Mayfairs. Because the fact is, Rowan doesn't know how to act like a Mayfair because she doesn't know any of them, right? So no effort's been made. In the meantime, okay, we have this anti-witch / MAGA people holding their rally in the middle of the woods where the coroner has taken Deirdre's heart in his whole ass lunchbox, and then gives it to the main like MAGA guy, and he holds it up and whatever. Now, there is a Talamascan guy I saw, the bald guy who was with the South Asian lady. He's in the crowd, right? So, but I don't know whether he's in the crowd like physically or whether he's like some astral projection, but we see he's there, right? So, meanwhile, Tessa meets up with Rowan. They're talking about the transference. They're talking about all these witch burnings or whatever like that. And they decide they're going to do the transference. We get to the transference, and literally, like, they're doing this really bad they're doing this transference, and it's like, okay, special effects, eyes back. Lasher shows up. He's like, all of this just to get rid of me. She's like, yes. He's like, there's a price to this. She's like, I can live with it. And basically, they transfer Lasher to Tessa, and she decides to throw up, and the locket comes out of her. The necklace comes out of her mouth, and there we have it with that, right? So Tessa is now bound to Lasher. Now, something interesting that they really didn't clear up. So now that Tessa is bound to Lasher, is she due to designee? Does she own the house? Because what we see is Tessa strolling through the house like she's like Crystal Carrington in the mansion. And I was like, oh, so does Rowan get kicked out the house now? Is the house not Rowan's? And then she's texting someone on the MAGA witch board or whatever like that. And she decides that she's going to go meet her. Tessa tells us earlier that her witch power is she can glamour people and make men like do whatever they want for a few minutes. So she meets the Moore guy in the woods, starts to glamour him, and then guess what, chick? He didn't come by himself. He has people, and they snatch up Tessa. And I'm like, why do we care about this storyline? Why are we caring about Tessa? Like they have done nothing to introduce this character. They've done nothing to really make us really care about this. But I'm like, again, these would have been characters that you should have spent time developing and introducing earlier on instead of just foisting this extra storyline in, right? So now Tessa's been captured, Lasher's been transferred, and that's pretty much the episode, right? So just a complete fumble with this entire episode. I'm still gonna do it. I think maybe next year or next season, I think this show would have been a better or more interesting watch if you binged them all together, right? And so so next season, I may decide to couple up and do like 2 episodes at a time. Because if they're still going to keep playing in our faces and moving really slowly and giving us underdeveloped plot lines and giving us really bad writing and mediocre acting, like, it's just going to vex my spirit, right? And I don't want to get on here every week trashing a show that put foods in people's mouths. That is a realization of someone's hard work and dreams, but they really need to stop like playing in our faces. And I really hope moving into the second season that they really kind of fix some of these mistakes. Because at this point, I still don't care about what happens to Rowan. And I find her annoying because the writers only want to use her or bring up her medical experience when she tries to make someone else feel small, right? So in the conversation with Cortland, he's like, well, if you lose Lasher, then you're going to lose all your medical intuition. And she's like, not my 10 years of medical training, right? So when Rowan needs to be a doctor and use her rational head, like not taking drinks from people in random streets, knowing how to fix sipping when he's cut, acting rational, trying to get out the house, not going on a romantic, like, hay rides and walks in the night with like some quasi-demon, trying to investigate and figure out who this quasi-demon is, what he wants you, all these things that someone whose profession is rooted in science and the scientific theory and treatment of hypothesis, research, experimentation. She doesn't do any of that when it counts, but when she needs to kind of high step over someone, that's when she decides they want her to be a doctor and whatever. Or when she's checking a clerk, when she's trying to like gut check a clerk and have her call her Dr. Fielding or whatever like that. So I was just kind of like, at this point, they made Rowan very unlikable because they have just made her meandering. And that whole scene in the beginning when Rowan is trying to lie to Sip, and she's like, "Oh my God, no!" And I was like, "Girl, stop it!" Like, it was just really, really horrible. So even if it did come from the source material, it was just really poorly placed and just really poorly done. So, that's Mayfair Witches. I'm going to keep reviewing it. I still have hope that maybe this ship can turn around, right? That maybe we got either 2 or 4 more episodes left in this season, and that maybe this can turn around and really give us some kind of connective tissue with Interview with the Vampire, how they're building this world. Because at the end of the day, I recognize that this show needs to stand on its own and be true to its source material and not necessarily be a replicant of Interview with the Vampire, but they have not established that it's in the same universe, right? They have not established anything that's going on within the same universe. And if you're universe building, if this is your second block in the universe, you need to have some kind of connective tissue, whether by reference, whether by exposition, whether by a sighting or some type of way to know that these two stories are occurring within the same universe and the characters have had some iteration or knowledge of each other, or that they will because their paths are going to meet at some point, right? They've done none of that, right? So we're just watching this wishy witch, you know, who's gonna finally maybe cast a spell sometime by the end of the episode, fumble around and use all the black people in this show just to do all the heavy lifting and be like magical Negroes or discarded characters. So again, that's Mayfair Witches. I hope you guys have a great week. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe. And I will see you guys later. Bye.